Good afternoon, pilot teachers, and good afternoon, students. Okay, thank you. Sit down. Okay, if you're going to check on our work now on what you were supposed to have completed for your homework, and if you looked at what you were supposed to have done for your homework was construction of diagrams, and that is supposed to be well-labeled diagrams showing how calderas were formed. And yesterday we looked at the three ways in which a caldera could be formed. It could be formed through one, explosion of the sides or the slope of the volcanoes resulting in a huge depression. Number two, engulfment of the inner part of the volcano resulting in a depression being created. And number three, through the process of erosion, the slopes or the side of the volcano could be eroded away, resulting in a depression being created. Your diagrams then, note you should have at least 2 or more diagrams to show the stages before eruption, during eruption, and after eruption. So look at the example that we have on the monitor. We're looking at during or early stages before the eruption. You have the volcano as shown from the monitor. During the eruption, the continuous flow of magma out onto the surface, and as well as that the emptying of the magma chamber for this particular example. And then we have a collapse of the summit or the top of the volcano, then resulting in the formation of a caldera. Given time, a lake may actually, or water may fill up that particular depression, resulting in the formation of a lake, like in the case of the Crater Lake in Oregon. And if the magma at the bottom of that particular feature is still active, you might end up having volcanoes starting to come up from that particular lake, like in the case of the example that is shown or given. But your task for homework was simply to do the constructions and make sure that from your constructions you have labeled the diagrams correctly. Okay, our lesson today, we will move on now to looking at types of eruptions, and we will also look at volcanoes in Papua New Guinea. We have studied about volcanoes around the world. We have looked at the structures of volcanoes. And when we talk about the structure of volcanoes, we have identified 3 structures, and they are the shield volcano types, the ash and cinder volcano types, and the composite or the strato. And those were referring to the structure of volcanoes. I also mentioned that generally around the world and in Papua New Guinea, all the volcanoes can actually be classified under one of those structures that we have looked at. Today we are going to look at eruption type. Volcanoes can also be classified under the type of eruptions that occurs in the lifespan or the cycle of that volcano. And here are some of the common eruption type of which we are going to go through looking at. And after we've gone through that information, we are going to look at volcanoes in Papua New Guinea, and we are going to see if we can identify from some of the volcanoes we have in the country what type of eruption those volcanoes in Papua New Guinea have actually gone through. And in order for us to be able to identify and also work out which eruption type some of the volcanoes in Papua New Guinea have gone through, we are going to use the 2 handouts that were distributed to help us, because those handouts will contain background readings giving us some idea about the type of eruptions different volcanoes in Papua New Guinea may have gone through. But before we do that, let's look at the eruption types as presented and shown on our monitor. You have a worksheet, of which that worksheet also contains explanation of those eruption type. I will not look at the worksheet. I will go through the information from the monitor. You can make reference to that worksheet later on. Okay, from the monitor, when we're looking at eruption type, we can see that there are a couple of classifications that we can put the eruption types under. And they are, the first one, Plinian type eruption. The second one, Vulcanian type eruption or Vulcanian eruption. The third one, Strombolian eruption. Then we have the Hawaiian eruption and the Icelandic Eruption. From your worksheet, you will also note there is one more which I have included, and that is the one on the Pelanian Eruption. That is the last one you will find on your worksheet. Let's look at an explanation and some examples of each of those types of eruption. We'll start with the first one, the Plinian Eruption. It tells us there from the information on our monitor that the Plinian eruptions are the most dangerous and explosive type eruptions. The magma is high in viscosity and gas content and can cause a lava plume over 10 miles high in the sky or in the air. The Pompeii explosion of Mount Vesuvius is an example of a Plinian type eruption. If we look at the information from our worksheet also, other examples of the Plinian type eruption around the world, we have the Tarawera volcano in New Zealand in 1886 had also the Plinian type eruption. We have the Vesuvius volcano in Italy, 79 AD, had this type of eruption, and Mount Pinatubo in the Philippines in 1991. They had this type of eruption, which is the Plinian type eruption. You have a photograph or a picture there showing the type of eruption occurring from one of the volcanoes. Okay, from the information on the monitor, it goes on to say that a Plinian type explosive eruption from the crater peak vent, you can see the hidden beneath the clouds. That's referring to the crater peak vent of a Plinian type explosive eruption. And this is on Mount Spur in Alaska. It sent an eruption column to a height of about 18 kilometers above sea level. Have another example of the Plinian type eruption, the October 1974 Plinian eruption of Fugo. You can see there a vertical Plinian eruption column which extends much higher than the picture can actually show. Note the profound darkness caused by the shadow of the ash cloud, which extends to as high as 25 kilometers. And here we are looking at some examples of that type of eruption, which is referred to as the Plinian type eruption. Okay, we move on to the second example. And the second example is the Vulcanian type eruption. From the monitor, the photograph there is a view which shows an upward convecting column of small Vulcanian-style explosion. And here we are looking at the clouds mantle of Santa Maria, the volcano Santa Maria, the Vulcanian type eruption as shown there. Your handout or your worksheet will explain more on the Vulcanian type eruption. More information there given on the Vulcanian eruption. Here we have the Vulcanian eruption covering Toyaka, that's onsen, April 2000 from a distance of 12 kilometers. There was a 10-kilometer exclusion zone around Mount Usu volcano. And here we have a Vulcanian type eruption as shown there from the photograph. You can read more on the Vulcanian eruption, again from the handout or the worksheet that has been distributed. That's the second type. Let's move to the third type of eruption, and that is the Strombolian eruption. It says here that Strombolian eruptions are characterized by the intermittent explosion of fountaining of lava from a single vent or crater. Each episode is caused by the release of volcanic gases, and they typically occur every few minutes or so. Sometimes rhythmically and sometimes irregularly. And that is referring to the Strombolian eruption type. You have a view and an example of a Strombolian eruption, and here we're looking at Stromboli volcano has one of the world's longest recorded periods of activity. The characteristic of Strombolian summit eruptions have been absent since the landslide. And here you have lava flows in December 2002 from that particular picture as shown. Here we are looking at an example of the Strombolian type eruption. Okay, the next example of eruption type then will be that of the Hawaiian eruption. Looking at the information from the monitor and information presented, it tells us the eruption of Kilauea volcano as viewed on the dawn of January 30th, 1974. Overflows from an active lava lake spill down the flank of the volcanic shield at Mauna Ulu, and the height of this shield was nearly 400 feet. We look at the Hawaiian eruption type. Lava fountains can actually vary widely in size and form. And there you can see curtain of fire viewed from the ground during the 1984 Mauna Loa eruption in Hawaii. And again, you can see the curtain of fire 50 to 100 feet high during the 1971 eruption. That's at the Kilauea Summit eruption as viewed from the air. And that is the second photograph, whereas this one here is showing the 1984 Mauna Loa eruption. Those are some examples of the Hawaiian type eruptions. You can also view the two people standing out here, and you make a comparison with the curtain of fire which is released from those volcanoes. Okay, we also have what we call the Fischer eruptions, and for the Fischer eruptions, we also have the Icelandic, of which we can put those two together. But let's check the Fischer eruptions first, and it says there for Fischer eruptions, it occurs when magma flows up through cracks in the ground and leaks out onto the surface. This often occurs where plate movements has caused large fractures in the Earth's crust, and may also spring up around the base of a volcano with a central vent. So the word fissure refers generally to cracks or fault lines or faults, especially on the surface, where it allows the flow of magma up onto the surface. And sometimes we can also have those type of eruptions where there are fissures, magma flows up and out onto the surface. The photograph there can show an example where you can see the lava flowing from the fissures. More information on the Fischer eruption we can look at from maybe other sources or other information that we can collate or put together. We'll check the Icelandic eruption. That's the next type of eruption now, the Icelandic eruption. And here we see the Icelandic rift eruption. We have like Laki and Hekla, of which those are also volcanoes which are found in Iceland. And you can see an example there from the photograph of an Icelandic eruption. Okay. Having looked at those information, I'd like us to also make reference to the last type of which we did not actually get any information on, and that is any information on the monitor on, and that is the one on the Pelanian Eruption. And we can make reference now to the information from our handout or the worksheet. So if you can check that information, it tells us there, for the Pelanian Eruption, it is a type of volcanic eruption which is named after Mount Pelly. And Mount Pelly is in Martinique, which is in West Indies, where extremely violent eruptions have occurred, including that in the 1902, when a very viscous lava plug solidified in the vent, and ultimately the cone and its lava spine were pulverized by the ejection of or flow of lava, which devastated a wide area. So another of those type of eruption can also be that of the Pelanian eruption. There is the Plinian eruption that we looked at already, and here we are looking at Pelanian eruption also you can have for the types of eruptions. Okay, having looked at those information, I'd like us now to look at volcanoes in Papua New Guinea, and from that information, we'll try to work out from the volcanoes in Papua New Guinea whether we have also volcanoes that erupt under those different categories or not. But before we can do that, we need to know about the different volcanoes that we have in the country and the location of those volcanoes. You have a map of Papua New Guinea there, and that map of Papua New Guinea will show you some of the common volcanoes we have in our country. Note also from the monitor, the key, the black, sorry, not the black, but the red dots, they indicate the active volcanoes in our country. The blue dots, they represent the extinct volcanoes in the country. And in our country, we also have dormant volcanoes. That means volcanoes which are sleeping and they are likely to erupt. When you look at that information, it is important you also recognize and know the location of those different volcanoes in the country. I might give you a test, then I might give you a blank map of Papua New Guinea, and then I would ask you, on that blank map of Papua New Guinea, plot in where the Matupit volcano is, or plot in where the Karkar volcano is. So look at the map and make sure you also recognize the location of those different volcanoes in the country. Okay, do we need to make a list of some of them? I think it's clear and straightforward from the monitor and also from your handout. Okay, now I'd like us to go to looking at our background readings with regards to volcanoes around Papua New Guinea, and then we are going to have some discussions. You're going to work in threes, and you're going to discuss and make a list of some of the examples of volcanoes in Papua New Guinea and which of the different eruption types that we have looked at can they come under. But before we do that, let's look at the background reading now from the worksheet, Active Volcanoes. Okay, do you have that information, the reading, Active Volcanoes? Okay, I'm going through the information, you can follow. Papua New Guinea is actually part of the so-called Pacific Girdle of Fire, or Pacific Ring of Fire. We've learned about that already when we looked at the volcanoes around the world. And this colorful phase draws attention to the fact that many of the unstable zones near Pacific margins are characterized by volcanic activity. The incomplete and fragmentary information recorded on volcanic activity in Papua New Guinea region indicates that eruptions have occurred at 17 volcanic centers in historical times. Another 12 centers are regarded as likely to erupt again because they retain active gas vents or because their well-preserved form suggests that only a short time has lapsed since they last erupted. As volcanoes may remain dormant over many centuries, their designation as active or extinct presents difficulties in a country whose written records barely extend beyond a century. Note there, the volcanic zones are generally accurate. Remember, we did work on the plate boundaries within Papua New Guinea. So if we can recall to that particular map that we have covered already on the plate boundaries in Papua New Guinea, we can also make reference to the location of the active and also the dormant volcanoes in our country. See if we can picture the boundaries in Papua New Guinea, plate boundaries that is, and we also look at the location of the active and the dormant volcanoes we have in our country. And it tells us there that the volcanic zones are generally accurate, paralleling the structural trends of the region and the main tectonic earthquake regions or zones. The three principal areas of volcanic zones include: 1, an arc on the southern margin of the Bismarck Sea, extending 900 kilometers from Bam, near Wewak, to Rabaul, and paralleling the Makam-Sipik Depression and the New Britain Trench. So if we look at our map of Papua New Guinea, we are looking at this area here, and we are coming all the way here to this region. That is one area. And if you look at the location of the volcanoes also, you note that definitely the volcanoes, they follow the boundary or the plate margins that we have looked at for Papua New Guinea. So from here, Bam, all the way up to the New Britain area. That's one zone. The second zone in Papua New Guinea is an arc beginning the Solomon Islands, parallel with the Solomon Trench, which extends 600 kilometers northwest to include the islands of the eastern coast of New Ireland. Tuluman in the Admiralty Islands may be the most westerly member of this particular chain, and that's the second group we are looking at. The third zone is a zone in eastern Papua, which extends 300 kilometers from Mount Lamington to Dobu in the D-Antarctic Islands. So those are the three zones, of which, if you look very carefully, they also contain some of the active and the dormant volcanoes in our region. I'll stop here. With that information, what I'd like us to look at next then would be what we are going to actually work on for our discussion. And this worksheet I'm going to give you, I'm going to want you to have at least 1 between 3, and I will explain very quickly that information on the chart, and you also can make reference to the worksheet of which I'm distributing now. 1 between 3. You can pass around. Okay, at least if you have a worksheet between 3 people, we are going to be discussing in also threes. Therefore, you can have that information when you're discussing, you can make reference to it. Okay, so looking at that information from the worksheet, this particular information will maybe help you when you are looking at examples of volcanoes in Papua New Guinea and the types of eruption, but it also gives you just a little bit more information on the different volcanoes we have in the country. So if you look at the information from the worksheet, or you can refer to the monitor, the regions that we've talked about, we can see that now from the first column. And here we have the Bismarck Volcanic Arc. And within the Bismarck Volcanic Arc, you have some volcanoes, of which those volcanoes are dormant, which means they are sleeping. They can erupt anytime. And examples of those volcanoes in the Bismarck Volcanic Arc are the Bloop Bloop. You can make reference to your Papua New Guinea volcanic map. Kadavo, Talo, Garove, Makalia, Gabuna, the Glacioseulo, and also the Bamus volcano. All of those are volcanoes found within the Bismarck Volcanic Arc, and they are supposed to be the dormant volcanoes in that region. When you read across, the andesite, dacite, or firelite we're looking at here, they represent those materials which are actually common in those volcanoes. So where the dots are, that says that type of material is common in that volcano. Where there are no dots, like in the case here, that means those materials are not dominant or common in that volcano. You look at the second column. The second column shows lava dome. We should all know what lava dome volcanoes are now from what we have covered on the volcanic structure. Where the red dots are, it represents those volcanoes which are of lava dome. No red dot, that means they are not lava domes. We did work yesterday on Caldera. If you look at the red dots there, it indicates those volcanoes within that regions that are, or that have what we call calderas. And then you have the pyroclastic flow deposits. The red dots then will indicate those that have that type of deposit. Okay, and that is how you read and look at that information. Look at the Bougainville volcanoes, which are dormant. There's two of them there, Balbi and Loloru. You can make reference to those other information as I've explained already. The Eastern Papua or East Papua, the Kukur volcano and the Victory volcano. The D-Entrecastic islands, we have Wagipa, Lamonai, Oyo, and Dobu. You can refer to the other information for those dormant volcanoes. And don't forget the New Guinea highlands. We also have Doma Peaks and Yelia. Okay, we move on. And that's that worksheet which contains that extra information for you to look at when you're doing your discussions. What I'd like you to actually look at now is, I'd like you to go through the information from those two worksheets, and I'd like you to discuss in threes. And from your discussions, I'd like you to actually list some examples of New Guinea volcanoes under those different eruption types that we have already looked at. You need to refer to the notes that we have gone through on types of eruption, and you also refer to the worksheet that were distributed. So you make a list now of the different volcanoes we have in the country under those different eruption types. You cannot fit all the volcanoes in Papua New Guinea under those eruption types, but you can find some examples from the handouts that were distributed. So you skim through in your groups of three, and from your skimming, you make a list. So you're going to make a list of volcanoes in Papua New Guinea, some of those, and the type of eruptions that those volcanoes have actually gone through. And when we work in threes, it might help us so that we can come up with the information quicker. We go across to this side. So there's three of them, and there's three over here. Worksheets or the handouts are for you to keep so you can highlight and underline, especially to locate the different volcanoes in Papua New Guinea and to work out what type of eruption some of them have actually gone through in terms of when they exploded or when they erupted. Look at the worksheet. This one here basically shows you some of the examples of dormant volcanoes. And it's the same information here, but because we couldn't fit everything on the monitor, we got some of it off and we just put the main ideas we'd like you to have for how to read this table. Okay, this is only the dormant volcanoes. If you look here, this one shows you the active volcanoes in Papua New Guinea. Okay, for all of them, you might not be able to find out what type of eruptions they've done because some of them may not have erupted. So therefore, from the readings now on volcanoes, here's the readings. You might be able to pick up from the readings types of eruptions for certain types of volcanoes we have in the country. So from this Also help some students who are still maybe still searching for that information. Rebecca, at the back, you're going to give us at least examples from what you have done. You've gone through the 2 handouts that I've given, you've skimmed through. And can you give us some examples now of volcanoes in Papua New Guinea and the type of eruptions that those volcanoes had according to information we have from the worksheet or the handout? Gibes, can you pass the microphone down? And the rest of you, you can double check. Perhaps with the 1 or 2 answers that Rebecca will give, we'll also allow time for the rest of you to actually go ahead and check to make sure you know what you're doing for those activities. Okay, Rebecca, your answer for that question.
The islands that I put under Strombolian Eruption are, the volcanoes I put under Strombolian Eruption are Manam, Karkar, Long Island, Ulawon, and Mount Leamington. I put it under Volcanian Eruption.
Sorry, Rebecca, wait. Can you give us, first of all those that you put under Strombolian again?
The volcanoes I put under Strombolian are Ulawon, Long Island, Karkar, Manam. Yeah, that's all.
Okay, so check. The rest of you, you should be able to find that information. Strombolian, those examples she's given. Okay, good. Rebecca, the next one, the next volcanic eruption type that you've also got information for?
Volcanian Eruption.
Okay, check. The Vulcanian Eruption type, that's the second example.
I put Mount Leamington.
Okay, Mount Leamington.
That's
okay.
Just that Mount Leamington.
Good. So check Vulcanian type eruption, Mount Leamington. Any others that you have got down beside the Strombolian and the Vulcanian type eruptions?
Mount Leamington, I also put it under the Pelanian activity eruption with the Bagana volcano.
Okay, Bagana, check. That's in North Solomons. And Mount Leamington, you also put that under the Pelanian
yes.
type eruption. Okay, not the Plinian, but it is the Pelanian. Okay. Okay, the Pelanian type eruption, you've also got Mount Leamington again and Bagana. And that's exactly what you were supposed to have done. So for those students who are still searching and looking for that information, I will allow you time then to go off and maybe to complete those activities for your homework. You have 2 lots of readings to make reference to, and if you can find other information beside the readings I've distributed, you may go ahead to doing that. That will also conclude our lesson for today. Class, if you can now stand up. Okay, to the pilot teachers, our keyword for lesson 39 is ash. Good afternoon and thank you, class.